Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the January 7th, 2014 business meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. We have a quorum of members present. I'd like to call the meeting to order. To begin the meeting, we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. And to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, we have Kendall Reichert from 4th grade at Paramount Elementary. Kendall, you want to come to the microphone?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Kendall, you want to come back to the microphone and introduce? I love it when our kids are shy. Who'd you bring with you today?
I brought my mom and my sister Peyton.
Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Peyton, for braving the cold and coming out here today. Tell us a little about yourself, Kendall. What do you like to do? What's your favorite subject in school? What do you do when you're not in school?
Well, sometimes I make jokes. I'm sort of a comedian.
Do you have a joke you could tell us?
Okay. Why didn't the skeleton cross the road?
I don't know why I didn't cross the road.
Because he had no guts.
You are quite a comedian. I like that. Anything else you want to tell us? What's your favorite subject in school?
My favorite subject is art.
Art. Excellent. Well, anything else you want to add? You look like you were about to say something.
My favorite color is pink.
All right. Well, thank you, Kendall, for leading us in the pledge. Thank you to Mom, and thank you to Sister for bringing her.
Thank you for me to be here.
All right. You have a great day and stay warm. Are there any other guests? If you could follow that, right? Any other guests or students that anybody'd like to introduce today? No? We'll move on then to the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Mr. President, I move to approve the agenda as recommended.
Motion by Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. President.
Second by Mr. Ridenhour. Is there any discussion or amendments? If not, all those in favor of approval of the agenda? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Approval of the minutes?
Mr. President, the board had 3 meetings on December the 17th, a work session, a closed session, and a regular business meeting. And with those, we had 3 sets of minutes, and I would recommend approval for all.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Ridenhour seconds. Is there any discussion, any corrections to the minutes? Mrs. Williams?
Yes, sir. I have a few. On the minutes of the work session for December 17th, first paragraph, last sentence, Hal asked his colleagues. I believe that's Dr. Harding's instead of Hal. And on page 2, the paragraph beginning board members. There's the wrong tense of review.
That one's already been corrected.
Has it been corrected to considered? Okay. And that would be the corrections that I have for the work session. And then I have a correction for the business meeting. No, I'm sorry. Yes, it is the business meeting, I believe. On December 17th, page 18, 8 lines down, the word for in 4 grades should be floor, F-L-O-O-R.
Great.
And those would be the corrections.
Great.
So I'd like to move that those corrections be made to the minutes of the work session and the minutes of the open meeting.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion on the corrections to minutes? Okay, all those in favor of Mrs. Williams' motion to correct the minutes? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. We're back to the original motion. Are there any other corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of the approval of the minutes? Is there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Great, thank you, everyone. Next, we have public comment. We have one individual signed up to speak, Mr. David Hanlon. David, you've been here before, so I know you know the procedure. So, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, President Harding. Thank you, members of the Board of Education. Thank you, Dr. Wilcox. I'm here to speak about the Summer Learning Camp report you're going to hear this afternoon, a little bit later here. I have the pleasure of serving as chairman of the Rotary Literacy Initiative that is trying to advocate for early childhood literacy issues, specifically getting children in our Washington County to be better prepared to start kindergarten and to help stem the tide of summer learning loss, especially when it occurs up in 4th grade. We've been meeting for almost 3 years. You know about our summits. You've been invited, and many of you have participated. I want to just point out this particular initiative, perhaps it was born from you all. It was born from the staff of the Washington County Public Schools. It was done in response to a question, what can you do differently? This is a fabulous program. The feedback I've gotten has been tremendous. I'm sure that the results we'll see shortly echo that, although I am not privy to those results. This effort came out of, it is not a top-down, state-directed mandate, but rather it's one born of our community, born of this organization and commitment to making our community a better place. And I want to thank you. I hope the results will encourage you to support it again in the future, and perhaps, as in any experiment, to tweak it and make it better for next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. Anybody have any brief response they'd like to offer? I'll just thank you for your comments, and thank you for your work, and thank you for the Rotary Club's work in trying to broaden the footprint of what we do as Washington County Public Schools in helping our earlier youth in their literacy. So thank you, Mr. Hanlon. Next, we move to new business. First is the consent agenda.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, and members of the board, and Happy New Year, one and all. 3 bids on the agenda this afternoon for your consideration. The first contract is a recommendation to continue to purchase our health room supplies from Henry Schein Incorporated of Melville, New York. This would be for a second year of a contract that was awarded last year. It will be effective January 1 through December 31st of 2014. Office and health room supplies are provided by the school system to the health rooms in the school system. And this is the contract vehicle from which those purchases are made. The second item on the agenda is bid 2014-41. 3 bids were received in response to the solicitation. Establishing a contract for the removal and replacement of approximately 60 air handling units and cabinet unit ventilators, along with new blower coil units and rooftop units. This system is original to the school from 1967 era and is beyond its serviceable life. This work would be undertaken this spring, and completion of the project would be required by August of 2014. This project is partially state funded. It did include minority business enterprise participation goals, and it is a wage scale project. The awarded vendor will be paying employees prevailing wage rates to perform this project. The Procurement Review Committee met prior to the holiday and is recommending M&M Welding and Fabricators of Gaithersburg, Maryland, under the base bid alone in the total lump sum of $3,046,000. M&M Welding has completed other large projects for Washington County Public Schools, as well as for many other agencies in the state of Maryland. They're recommended with high degree of confidence in their abilities to perform this project for us. Third item is to construct a handicap ramp for the administration building. Staff contacted 2 companies to obtain price quotes for this project. Building Systems provided a quote, and Chuck Harrell Home Construction, the company that holds our current contract for concrete paving work, also submitted a quote. They were the lowest responsive bidder to that request. So to ensure progress of work within the overall construction project, a purchase order was issued to Chuck Harrell Home Construction on December 20th. The purchase order is MKK91, and we're requesting your approval of a waiver of the bid requirement, allowing that purchase order to be authorized to Chuck Harrell Home Construction in the total amount of $58,643.04. And here for questions, as well as some other folks in the room. Do you have any for me today?
Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move to approve the purchase of health supplies from Henry Schein, Inc. for a second year at fixed unit prices. AHU CUV replacement at E. Russell Hicks Middle School to M&M Welding and Fabricators at $3,046,000. And purchase order MKK91 to Chuck Harrell Home Construction for a handicap ramp at the Administration Center for $58,643.04.
Motion by Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. President.
Second by Mr. Ridenhour. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Brightman?
On the health room supplies, the renewal, how many years have we, I guess the question is, since we assumed the nursing program here in the school system, prior to that, did we purchase this, or was this part of the health department contract with us? Have we looked at Meritus as far as any type of quantity price breaks?
We did obtain feedback, not only from Janice Howes, our new nurse coordinating employee here, as well as there was direct contact with the supervisor of nursing at Meritus to develop this list. I will say that I started quotes when I came here in '09, so we had been doing quotes all along, because the schools did have a requirement for these supplies even before the nurses came on
So
board.
we were always purchasing these?
Yes.
Okay.
Not maybe the exact items and the exact quantities, but at a smaller scale, yes.
So this isn't an additional cost as to that program being?
Not fully, no.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion or questions? Mr. Bailey?
Just a question on the E. Russell Hicks air conditioning. E. Russell Hicks is over 50 years old, I believe. Is this the first replacement?
Of mechanical equipment?
Mr. Michael says yes.
Yes. and
So
no.
the first was very good, lasted over 50 years.
So we've gotten our money's worth.
Indeed we have. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? If not, the question is on Mrs. Brightman's motion to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Freeman. Superintendent's report is next.
I'm going to ask our Chief Academic Officer to come forward, as well as Matt Semler, who is the Director of Elementary Learning, to provide this report to the board.
Good afternoon, President Harding, Vice President Brightman, other members of the board, and Dr. Wilcox. Washington County Public Schools conducted its second primary literacy camp July 1st through August the 1st, 2013. During this time frame, our students attended school Monday through Thursday, with opportunities for extended day and then also co-curricular activities as well. What we'd like to share with you today are the results of the academic outcomes from this specific extended learning opportunity for our students. At this time, Matt Semler, Director of Elementary Schools and Early Learning, will lead.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board. As Dr. Domain said, I do have a review of our Primary Literacy Camp summer reading program. If you look through the PowerPoint, we have some information regarding just some statistics and information with data, and then also the academic program that we outlined for our summer. The goal for the reading program was designed to stop reading loss and to increase reading readiness for the next school year. We focused on a targeted group of students, which were our rising kindergartners, first and second graders, who had been identified needing support in reading. We looked at 3 different measurement areas: our MAP data, which we used our winter and spring assessment results. We also looked at the Fontes-Pinnell reading assessment as well as teacher nominations. What we found is typically that the students that were nominated from teachers also fell in the criteria of needing the support in reading based on the results of the 2 assessments. We had 6 sites. These sites we tried to do some central locations to make it convenient for students to attend the programs. The 6 sites included Conicajig Elementary, Hickory, Pangbourne, Rockland Woods, Salem, and Ruthven Monroe. Transportation was also provided for students. We had designated hubs at different areas for students that were traveling a distance that the bus could transport them to those sites. We had a partnership with Catapult Achieve, which focused specifically on a literacy program and supported the reading and writing initiative of the camp itself, as well as our WCPS teachers and administrators who were selected to essentially run the program and implement the instruction. If you look at the chart here, this gives us some numbers in terms of student participation and enrollments. Under the enrolled column, you'll see 2 sets of numbers. The first set shows the students that actually attended the program, and the second number that's represented there is the students that we originally had registered at the beginning of the program. Of course, in the summertime, when the program begins, we have to deal with summer changes with camps or vacations. So we resulted with 355 students that enrolled. We originally had 412 students that registered. When you look at the numbers, we had 58 total teacher support. Our teacher to student ratio ended up at a 6.12 per 1 teacher, so essentially 6 students for every 1 teacher. And we also had 6 parapros supporting special education needs through the different sites. The Catapult program actually outlined a 6-to-1 ratio to better meet the needs for remediation purposes. In terms of attendance data, when you look at the 355 students that attended the program, 123 of the students attended between 1 and 9 sessions. 232 students attended between 10 and 20 sessions. There were attendance incentives that were built in through both the classroom teachers and through the Catapult program. Looking at some of the data results that we received as part of the primary literacy camp, we looked at our kindergarten students first. They were measured on a scaled score based on a pre- and post-assessment, and on average, our kindergarten students showed an improvement of 42 points on that scaled measure. That represented essentially 75% of the students who participated demonstrated gains, and 95 students in kindergarten were tested. When we look at the first and second grade data, it was a percentile rank. Again, it was using a pre- and post-assessment that was given in the first day of the primary literacy camp and also administered the last day of the camp. We saw our first graders have a composite average increase from 35% to 59%. 84% of the students in first grade demonstrated those gains, so essentially of the 77 students, 84% of them showed gains based on that percentile rank. In second grade, we had an improvement of 44% to 52% of the percentile rank, and again, 59% of the students who participated demonstrated gains, and we had 69 total second grade students participate. We then decided to look at our MAP assessment data, where we looked at our spring 2013 administration and then looked at the data from our fall 2013 administration. The administered test for the spring MAP data was in May, and then we administered the fall MAP data in September. So within that time frame, the students participated in the literacy camp, and what we found is that 48%, essentially 162 students demonstrated growth over the summer. 14%, 46 students remained flat. They didn't lose ground. And we also noticed that 38% lost ground over the summer. Typically, the group of students that were recommended for the program are the students we see that have a tremendous amount of regression over the summer. So some of the data did demonstrate that they either we were able to stop the regression or give some improvement, but there were some students that also lost ground, and we're looking into that as well. The overall cost of the program was slightly over $450,000. When we looked at the original 412 students registered, that averaged almost $1,100 per student. That daily costs included the Catapult program, teacher and staff salaries, transportation, food services, nursing, various materials and resources. So a lot of that was included in the cost. The student day was a 6-hour day from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. With an extended day option until 5 p.m. where we had staff that would stay with a select number of kids that parents requested to have an extended day due to work situations, work schedules, and daycare situations. We also included a Claude Kitchens outdoor school experience where the students attended 2 days at the outdoor school, and they were involved with various STEM activities that also tied into the literacy program, but trying to do some cross-integration work with literacy and STEM initiatives. I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Domain, and she's going to share some findings that we had and some steps moving forward.
Taking into consideration our experience the second time, we are already thinking about what we would like to do differently for this upcoming year. We will look at our student identification model, again, reviewing those students that come in, their achievement levels, the depth of intensity that they need in the remediation process. We will do that in order to determine how they should best be placed, how we should best structure the program to meet their needs. We will also look at where we have the summer sites located. Did we get our highest and best use out of the selected facilities? Were there other places that perhaps could be used better, that would be more accessible to students perhaps? We will also look at the way that our specific sites have leadership. This past year, we had 2 co-coordinators who were essentially responsible for traveling to those 6 sites, and we know that that is a daunting task. So we are looking at another way to make sure that there is specific leadership designated at each site to ensure that materials are delivered on time, that students' needs are being met the way that they should. We are really looking to ensure greater fidelity to the instructional model, and we think that that is key. So we will make sure that we have aligned pre- and post tests in place before we begin. Also, we will make sure that the assessments that happen throughout those days are also aligned to the pre- and post-test assessments. What we would like to be able to do is to ensure that we have data, and the same type of data that we can use for historical, longitudinal analysis. We will make sure that our teachers have adequate professional development prior to the start of our summer literacy camp with the specifically designated leadership at each site. We believe that we will be able to provide better professional development and then also more specific support to those teachers who choose to participate in the summer program. Our supervisors are working already to make sure that a strong curriculum is in place along with daily lessons so that teachers will not have to search for material. We want to make sure that they have everything when they need it. And so we're working on the daily lessons, the structure of them, the content of them, and also the resources for them. We will make sure that common instructional resources are, again, identified earlier and distributed. Again, we want to make this not necessarily an easy task, but we want to make sure that our teachers are given the tools that they need in order to be successful and to have our students be successful. We will also make sure that those ancillary experiences that our children have the opportunity to participate in are closely aligned with the work that they are doing in the classroom, either redesigned or eliminated. Again, we're trying to make sure that there is alignment throughout all of the activities that our kids participate in. And we have decided, for various reasons, that we will eliminate the private partnership component. One great need that we heard from teachers is that we would like the opportunity to build our own curriculum. We know our students, we have our materials. We would like to have some say in how the work is developed and how it is carried out. And so we are working with supervisors and lead teachers for, again, the curriculum aspect, the daily lesson aspect, the assessment aspect as well. So we're listening to our teachers who have participated and also those persons who served as leaders, so that we can ensure that this summer we will have an even more positive experience for all who are involved.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comment or discussion from board members? Mr. Bailey, and then we'll come to Mr. Reynolds.
Have you given any consideration to looking at these same children who had the benefit of the summer program, say at the beginning or at the end of the third grade year, to see how successful they have been? I think that's a critical stage by the third grade. You know, you really need to know whether they're going to read or whether they aren't going to read. Can we, by technology, be able to put a tag on these individuals and then just pull that up and see how well prepared they are in third grade? Is that a possibility?
We can certainly look at the groups of students that attended. The rising second graders are now the current third graders this year, so when we were pulling the data, we actually were able to pull that data specifically for those kids, and we can then look at their map from the winter assessment and then as well as the spring assessment to see if they're continuously making gains based off of the support that they received from previous school years, but also through the summer programs.
Yeah, I think that would be useful information. I think the superintendent has indicated on a number of occasions that youngsters certainly need to be able to read by the time they enter or especially finish the third grade.
Mr. Reiner?
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions, and I think you guys probably are still crunching numbers and taking a look at some of this data. I was looking at the attendance. It's 20 days total was the, okay, and it says 123 between 1 and 9 sessions. Is there any data yet that you guys have looked at that indicates that those who came less did poorer, or understand where I'm coming from? You know, the fewer days they came, where do they fall on that, you know,
Correlation.
correlation? Yeah, is there a correlation? Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Correlation between attendance and, I mean, I think this is a hugely important program. I really do, because, you know, we've seen that historically, that kids lose during the summer months. And I want this to be as successful as possible. And like I've said before, if kids aren't in school or in these programs, or only in them, you know, half-heartedly, you know, I don't know how they're going to help them. So, you know, if you can find, is there any correlation that you've seen yet, or are you guys still looking at that, Angela?
We have not done a correlation between the attendance and the students' achievement. It was a challenge to even get the achievement data that we have. That's why we're looking at who we select and making sure that they are really interested and will follow up. If you'll see even the numbers that show the achievement data that we have, those numbers are lower than the actual numbers of students who attended, because they had to take both the pre and the post to be counted even in those numbers. So that is something that we will certainly look at this summer. We will make sure that, we emphasize to our parents that we need our kids here every day. And we will do that correlation on attendance and achievement.
And the other one, I'm looking at the fall cross match, the MAP. And again, I know you guys still are looking at things. I'm looking at 126 lost ground, which is mind-boggling, if they're there. Anything that jumped out at you guys as far as why that would have happened?
Certainly could have been the attendance. That could represent a number of the students who they weren't consistent with the attendance of being there for the summer. The other thing to keep in mind with the MAP assessment is since it's given in May and September, there is still some lag time in between the data sets. Moving forward, as Dr. Demain said, we're looking at using MAP assessment possibly for our summer data to look at that snapshot of time to see did those kids make gain in that time frame.
Right.
What the challenge was looking at the separation between the spring and the fall. We had the gaps in between. And even though they may have been participating in part of the program, again, attendance could have been an issue, and then the data might look different from what we received from the third party to what we have in-house MAP data.
Just one more thing before. Is there, do we have any leverage? Or is there a way for us to acquire leverage on these kids that we've identified that need this type of program? Any kind of leverage that we can, put on them or put on their parents? You've got to be here. 10% attendance isn't going to work. And you're putting yourself and everybody in serious harm's way. And what can we do, or what can be done to acquire that kind of leverage where we say, we need you to be here?
When we were registering kids, we really tried to put the emphasis on that if the students are going to register, if the parents are going to register the students, that we're making a commitment for the summer. It's a challenge then that if we get the call and say, well, we've changed our vacation plans, we're not going to be there, because then it becomes a challenge at that point. It's a good question. It's something we could certainly look into to see if there's another way to either have additional incentives for the kids or leverage. I'm not quite sure what we could do at this point, but it could be something we could certainly look into.
Because I still think, it's so important that we get them there.
But we do really stress as much as possible that when they are registering, that they are making a commitment for many reasons. One, we want them there, and two, they're taking a spot.
Interestingly, just to dovetail on that very quickly, what percentage of kids that you think should have been there, we registered, okay, well, they at least had the incentive to come and register. Is there a portion of children who are, in need of a program like this, to help them not lose or maybe even gain? What percentage of our students who are in that didn't register?
If I remember the number from Hope, I think it was about 50%, because we had a number, we had a goal, we had an initial goal of students, and when we didn't meet that, the department extended the date, did more aggressive recruiting to get even the number that we have.
Yeah. So
off the top of my head, I think it's about 50%.
So that's, like 300 students that probably should be there. That's
Right.
Correct.
Invitations were sent, and again, it was whether or not they registered.
I think our target was right at 800 students, but we drew a little over 400, and then 355 participated.
Wish there was a little more leverage that we had or could get.
Really, the only leverage I think you have is probably
legislation.
Promotion.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thank you.
A couple angles I'd like to go after here. It looks like we're probably going to be encouraged to have universal pre-K in Maryland, if not this year. It's just around the corner. With the the thought that the earlier we intervene with a child, the better chance we have to handle not just the reading literacy, but functional areas throughout, and so by third grade they are ready to perform. And did you look, or have you looked at the students who we've identified needing summer help? How many of those were in our existing pre-K programs? Have we looked at any kind of overlap? And I'm trying to see what the success at pre-K is and whether our resources would be better put in that direction, since we may be forced to go there anyway, and what kind of success we're having with that. Do you understand where I'm going?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I did not check to see which of these kids participated in pre-K. We can get that, though. So I will check with Maureen Markovich and get her to do that analysis.
Just seems like that would be good information going forward. And again, if we're looking at $1,000 per student for this program, what would that look like? And at this point, we do not receive funding for pre-K, and heaven knows if we'll get funding with the enhancement or expansion of pre-K. So I think that would be good information as we're looking at our budget. We're going into the budget cycle here in February, where those dollars might best be spent. And then staying with that idea, as I was looking through the master plan, and I know that when Dr. Wilcox came to this district, this was one of his first initiatives, the identification of the reading challenges that a large percentage of our population has. And I also know, though, literacy is a key component of Race to the Top. And so I was looking at the master plan, and it's like our Project 2, which is literacy, and then Project 6, which is turnaround schools, possibly. Have I lost my place here? And which would the summer program fall under? Because it's turning around the lowest achieving schools is Project 6 in the master plan. I know that the Race to the Top money goes away. This is the last year. And I'm wondering how, again, how many of these initiatives we're going to have to absorb, and do we pick and choose, and which ones have we had the best results from? And so the summer program, does it, from a budgetary standpoint, fall under turning around lowest achieving schools, or does it fall under the literacy initiative? I couldn't quite figure that out, because the literacy was secondary literacy, and it doesn't really mention elementary, so that's where I got lost on this.
Right. But it's a general fund expense to us, and we're categorizing under in terms of the master plan, it is part of promoting secondary literacy by having kids reading on grade level, at grade level.
Okay, so we're starting and hopefully...
Trying. It's kind of that pre-K idea, really. You want to get them as early as you can.
So I guess from a financial standpoint, if the two of you had a choice as to fund a summer program or fund a pre-K, and I'm hoping never to have to make that choice, and that's where I'm coming back to. This is $450,000. I want to be, excuse me?
About $500,000.
So I'm wanting to be sure that we're putting that money where these children can really receive full benefits. Can you help me kind of look at this?
We can. I'll give you a kind of a real gross analysis, though. The average cost of a teacher in this district is a little over $70,000, approximately $100,000 when you look at it fully loaded. So that's 5 teachers, and if a teacher can see 30 kids during the course of a day as a traditional classroom, that's 150 kids. Through the summer program, we touched a little over 400. Now, we only saw these kids for a month versus a year, so there's a lot of stuff that you have to look at in this. But I think the question that you're asking is the money well spent for the results that we're getting, $70,000 per kid? And that is something that we're going to have a conversation about, because, quite honestly, it's been treated as a voluntary program for young people. We probably need to make it a little more coercive if we want to get the results that we want. out of this. I think we have to tighten down our instructional methodology. Quite honestly, I wasn't always pleased when I went to some of our summer programs because it was treated as a summer program. There wasn't that intensity of instruction. That's one of the reasons you see one of the recommendations here for additional administrative support, because I really think that we have to have somebody there every day who said, you know what, yes, it is summertime, but we really need to teach, and we need to teach well during this time period. This isn't a time to, say to some kids, well, we really like you a lot, just, and kind of pat you on the head and say, go about doing what you've always done. But that cost analysis piece that you're getting at is something that we just absolutely have to do.
And again, in theory, if we're going to be doing universal pre-K in some fashion, if we did it right then, would you still think we would need a summer program? Or, I don't know, I'm asking. That's a tough one for me when I'm
Well,
looking
if we
at
did it right,
that's what I'm...
probably not.
Yeah.
I'd like to speak to that, if I may.
Yeah.
I am one who believes strongly in the need for summer school programming for literacy. I just don't think that we've arrived at the right model. And so the challenge, I don't believe, is identifying the students that we need to be in summer school. I think the challenge is designing the program that's going to be attractive to the students and serve the needs of the parents. And by, Mr. Ridenour is talking about leverage, and we're talking about talking to parents and having them understand the importance. I'm wondering if we've done any talking with parents to find out how the program could be designed in a way that would make it easier for them to get their students there, or more attractive to them to get their students there. I'm troubled by, when you talk about fighting loss over the summer, I'm troubled by the fact that, and this is maintenance, this isn't that we're expecting gains, but that we're expecting to maintain. When you have students that have lost ground, that's a bit troubling to me, or that, the maintenance there, 14% remained flat, and I'm thrilled and delighted for the 48 that did demonstrate gain. That tells me that we do need to do something about the design of the program and the effectiveness of the program. My understanding is that we bought, through Catapult Learning, a packaged program, did we not? And that we weren't using the day-to-day curriculum, that teachers were trained in the methods of Catapult Learning, and that was what the program was going to consist of?
Correct.
So now I'm hearing that wasn't effective in terms of what the teachers are saying, and that they would choose to develop their own lessons and choose to have their own assessments and so forth?
Teachers, yes. The teachers, from a survey that was conducted with teachers following this summer program, teachers did indicate that they would like to have some voice in the curriculum that is delivered to students.
Okay. So, and that investment in Catapult was a big chunk of that $450,000, I believe, and I would hope that we would, again, rethink that and rethink the design of next year's summer literacy camp, should there be such a thing, and I certainly hope that there is something in the summer. My other concern is with regard to the second graders. It seems as though the kindergartners and the first graders fared better than our second graders, and we know the importance of having kids reading by the time they're in third grade. So I'm wondering if there's something, again, when we're looking at the model and the design of this next camp, that we can really target in on those second graders. That apparently we're finding some things that we're doing right with the kindergartners and the first graders, but as we know, kids get older and more challenging as they develop, and those that are on their way to becoming reluctant readers are certainly a challenge. So I do have concerns about the results, but I do have faith that we can find a way to develop a summer program that's going to meet the needs of our kids and use our resources to our best advantage. So I hope we can think out of the box, and that summer 2014 holds greater achievement for us with regard to summer school.
So a couple of things. One, I agree, absolutely, we have to have better results for this program, but I want to address a couple of things. We did, in fact, talk to parents at the end of the first year of the program, and the program was redesigned in order to meet the needs and better reach families. Folks wanted more sites, so we went from 1 site to 4 sites. We expanded the opportunity for students to be accepted to the program. We moved away from providing free books to some other more rewarding experiences we thought during the course of it, because parents said, we don't read the books anyway, that's why my kid's there, they're non-readers, which we didn't quite understand, but that's what parents said to us. Parents also wanted extended days, so we not only went extended day morning, we went extended day afternoon, because we realized that people had child care issues that they were using us for, so we extended the program that way. We opened up our summer feeding program to bring more families in. We changed our food service model around in order to accommodate the families in the communities that we serve. We also reached out to try to get our very best teachers into this program in the summer. We were somewhat successful in that. I think we could still do an even better job with that, but we may have to look at the compensation systems that we use to entice teachers to participate in the summer. We also changed the time frame in which the summer program was organized. Previously, we had it at the end of the school year when some kids said, we're tired academically, we don't want to keep at it. Parents said our kids need a break, so we said, we'll move it to the front end, and we said, by moving to the front end, we would also give kids a jump start on the next school year, because they would be there for about 30 days, 20 days of classroom instruction, and then they would have a couple days off and school would start. And we thought that would be a carryover effect, so we made that change. I would come back to this issue of Kaplan. Kaplan did bring in a prescribed curriculum that has demonstrated results at a number of places. I'm not sure that we really gave it a chance. I don't really know that we implemented the model with fidelity. That's something that I'm trying to kind of get to the bottom of. It seems to me that, like many school districts, we're quick to embrace a program, but we're slow to really deliver the program in the way that which it was designed and developed to be delivered for, because we seem to always think, not here in Washington County, but in Frederick and other places, they think that, well, you know what, this is good, but I can do it better. And it's something that Dr. Domain and I experienced even 20 years ago when we were together in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, with a program. That said, I think teachers do have to own the curriculum they're teaching, but I'm not really sure that I would sit here today and say, well, let's turn it over to that set of teachers that are just going to teach summer school when we have so much collective wisdom across the system. It would seem to me that we ought to use our supervisors, our instructional specialists right now to help build that curriculum and then help develop the classroom teacher set. Because we clearly don't want to do more of the same, because the kids got to where they got because of what they had done. We want something new, different, and inviting, but we've got to build that. So I think we're on the same page. We want to get a better program together. We will probably reach out this spring again to some parents within the target schools, and we are going to look at some broader schools again as well and say what makes sense for you. And we probably won't say that everyone's got to have exactly the same program because some areas of the community are a little bit different than others. But this is the 3rd year of the program, and each year the program has changed. We hope to get to a sustainable model here shortly, but it's been a bit of a challenge.
Ms. Harshman?
Well, I had a couple questions, and one was about the teachers' input to the program. And I think Dr. Wilcox kind of addressed that, but I was concerned that they had not apparently been surveyed on what they would have done in this situation or how they might have presented the work. So maybe that would be something else, that if there's some way of getting the teachers who are going to do this more involved with the curriculum, and I think that's what Dr. Wilcox said you were going to try to do. So I just wanted to stress that. And I was wondering why some of the students were not tested. It has, not tested. Some of the students didn't get tested at the second.
They had to take both the pre-test and the post-test. They had to be present to take both the pre-test and post-test. And with the attendance being sporadic for some of our kids, they may have taken either one or the other. They had to have taken both to be included. in
Is
this.
there a test going into the next school year? Like a pre-test for whatever grade the students are going into? And if they did not get tested for the summer program, would it have shown up on a pre-test in the fall?
It would not have. This was a pre-test that was specific to the
Right.
curriculum that.
But there wasn't anything for students in general, a pre-test for students in general as they enter.
The MAP tests?
The MAP assessment is given in September.
In September?
Yes.
Okay, so would that not have shown up whether these had improved over the summer?
That's on the
based
third
on
to
that?
last slide is the results
Some
of
of
the MAP test.
the numbers of the MAP assessment look a little lower because, of course, after the summer, if their kids moved out of our school district, we saw a handful of kids that didn't take the September MAP assessment because they were no longer in our school district.
Okay, but they may have taken the test after the summer program, is that what
Possibly.
you're saying?
Yeah, they
That's what I
could have
wanted to
taken
know
it during the
if
summer program, but maybe not have taken the fall MAP.
Well, they
vice
never would have
versa.
taken MAP in the summer program.
Right,
They would have taken the
No, I
assessment,
understand that you would
McCaplin.
have taken
Correct.
the assessment, but if they did not get that assessment after the summer program, they could have picked it up at MAP, could they not? with
No,
the
it's a
MAP
different
test?
assessment. The Catapult program gave a pre-assessment on the first day and a post-assessment on the last day. If the kids were not there for either piece, either the first day or the last day, they weren't included in
But
the assessment
isn't the
measure.
MAP supposed to be whatever they should know at that time?
The MAP is a separate assessment
Regardless?
that's used. That
Yeah,
we
I
use.
know.
We
I-
use the
I
MAP
know that.
assessment
I'm just
data.
saying, would it not show whether these students had improved over the summer regardless of what it was testing? The things that they did over the summer should have improved on the MAP test.
They were included.
Correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
whatever students that were part of the program, the MAP assessment didn't look at how many days they attended. They
Right.
just took the MAP assessment in the spring and fall. They were included in that MAP slide where we showed the cross-match of the MAP data.
Right, so is there any correlation between students who did not take the summer program and those who did, as far as the number who stayed flat, who lost, and who gained? Is there any correlation between those two groups, the summer kids and the ones who did not attend summer?
We didn't correlate those. We did disaggregate those. We looked at the MAP scores of those students who were in the summer program to see their growth. And when those students were compared with those students who had similar scores, in other words, they also qualified to be in the summer program but did not attend for whatever reason, the outcome was similar.
You mean some grew over the summer anyway?
Some grew over the summer
some
anyway,
remained
some
flat,
remained flat,
and
some
some
regressed.
lost.
Correct.
Okay, so that worries me a little. If the program did not make a significant change to those students. And I think, again, Dr. Wilcox said that you were checking that, so I hope that we can come up with something, because apparently however this was done was not working the way it should have, or we hope that it should have. I also was wondering if the teachers who are involved in this program are given the opportunity to work in this program more than a year. In other words, if we train them, is there any way that we can kind of get their, not promise, but sort of their interest in keeping them in the program so that we don't have to keep training new teachers each year for the program? Is there?
We can certainly encourage them, but, you know, we advertise in February or March?
For teachers, March.
In March.
April.
Do we have returning ones?
There has been some returning ones over the past few years, yes.
Because I know with the high school, when they were doing summer, when we do summer programs, that a lot of teachers have taught summer school forever. So I'm just hoping that we can get some who are interested in the elementary grades to continue to return, because sometimes that helps. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you.
Are there other questions? I have a few that I'd like to ask. First, on the attendance data, you broke it up into attended 10 to 20 classes and 1 to 9. Why did you pick those numbers? And
That was actually data that was given to us through the Catapult program, because they track attendance data as well.
So does Catapult not have just a histogram of attendance data? I mean, that mean, median, mode? I mean, we ask our elementary kids to do that.
That was the data that they had given. I'm sure I could contact them and get additional data.
Okay. I mean, it just seemed an arbitrary number, and if there's something in the research that shows there's something important about that threshold half, then it would make sense. But if not, okay. On the MAP results, what are the criteria that we use to determine whether there was growth or not? If a student increased by 1 point, is that considered growth? If they decreased by 1 point, is that considered losing ground?
I believe we looked at 2 or more points as growth. We looked at if they stayed flat, obviously, or a 1 point differential staying flat, and then 2 or more points loss would be considered loss.
Okay, and I presume there's research somewhere in the literature that indicates that that's the confidence measure that we have on that particular test. That, you know, if a hypothetical student were to take it 5 days in a row, that the range of scores that you would expect that student to have over the 5-day period is within 2 points. Is that where that standard comes from?
I know that there's a standard deviation that they include in terms of when the students take a test with their RIT band measurement, because that's how they measure through RIT. I'd have to look at the number there. It's a number we looked at in terms of what we thought would be a number of percentage points or points in their RIT scores that would indicate enough to say that would be a growth.
Okay.
Could you explain the RIT score for people who are watching?
Essentially, the RIT score is what MAP uses for their testing numbers. So essentially, there's a RIT band that they say that if a student scores within 150 to 155 points, that's within, you know, a first grade level at the beginning of the first grade year. It's just their measure that they use. It's what they call it, the RIT band, or the RIT scores.
While you were saying that, it made me think too. Our teachers, who are our employees, who were the instructors, didn't take attendance every day?
It was through the Catapult. Yeah, the Catapult program had an attendance piece that they collected attendance. So the Catapult program, the teachers are trained in that, and that's part of the attendance measurement, yes.
But we lose that data because we were involved with Catapult.
No, we have the data, but that was the only representation they gave us. But like I said, I can get more in-depth numbers in terms of how many days or why they chose that 1 to 9 or 11 to 20 or 10 to 20.
And just lastly, in going to things that a number of my colleagues have said, I think when I look at the data that's presented here, I honestly don't think we have enough information to know whether it's successful, because what we're lacking is a control group. And in all the slides that are presented, we have nothing to compare it to. So when Mr. Ridenour is concerned, or Mrs. Williams concerned that 38% lost ground, I don't think we know whether that's a good number or not. I mean, certainly nobody wants to see a student losing ground, and that's not what I mean to suggest. But for a distribution of students who all take the MAP test in the spring and then in the fall, there's going to be some distribution of students who gain and some students who stay the same and some students who lose. And we don't know if 38% is more than the normal distribution that would lose, or if it's less. So it could be that if 38% lost ground, and in a distribution of students who weren't a part of this program, the number of students who lost ground was 50, then we can say that, well, this maybe has provided us a better outcome. But I don't think we have enough information here to know. And I assume maybe you're doing that as part of your own analysis. I would certainly hope so. It seems to me there's an obvious control group here, which is those students who were invited to be in the program but didn't come. I mean, they sort of met the same criteria that we established. Now, there may be some bias inherent in which children are able to get to the program. Therefore, maybe there's a slightly different demographic in those who were invited but didn't come than those who were invited but did come. But it seems as a starting point to provide those two comparable groups and then look at the MAP tests across both of them should really be able to tell us a lot more than what we're seeing here regarding whether this program was successful. And as I said, I assume you're doing that as part of your normal practice and review of the program. Perhaps next year it could be part of the presentation so that we can see it as well. Okay. Are there other questions?
Just a quick question. How many students do you see that if you had them in first grade 2 years ago, they came back in second grade this year? Like how many, I guess, repeat offenders do you have? What did you say?
You do see, I wouldn't know percentage-wise off the top of my head, but there are a large number of kids. Because what would happen, let's say, for example, if students in first grade, they could be more than a year behind. And although they're making some gains in the summer, and we're still trying to catch them up through the school year, they're still behind, that we still then target that group. So there are a large number of kids that seem to be those that are repeats.
And also, like, I'm guessing a lot of the kids that you have are kids that do not want to read. They're the kids that they would not pick up a book if you paid them because they just don't enjoy reading. I mean, I've known kids like that throughout my school experience.
It's a mix. There are some who just struggle with reading. There are some who maybe it's not their favorite thing. So we're trying to find ways to encourage them, find some high interest literature and things like that to get them involved. So it's definitely a mix.
Because, I mean, usually if you get a kid that wants to read, like, for instance, like my sister, she refused to read until she was 6, and now she loves to read. Like, she was not able to read until she was at age 6, but now, after that, she started to discover books, and now she's way above grade level because she loves to read. I'm just curious, is that the kind of program that this is, or is it just like teaching fundamentals, or?
Well, anytime we're teaching reading, we want to make it interesting for the kids. So we're trying to encourage them to be readers and trying to get them to be more interactive with books and picking up different pieces of literature. So in this summer program, and many of the summer programs we've done in the past are still targeting to do that. So we do still make some of the activities a little bit more exciting. It's not just kind of the sit and get type of reading. We really want them to be involved and interactive with the reading so that they're actually seeing that it's fun to read.
And one of the ways that we are trying to do that is by using authentic text as opposed to controlled text, which is, when you start to talk about the teaching of reading, there are several schools of thought as to how you go about that. One school is that you would control the text so that kids don't encounter words that are complex or have kind of a deeper meaning. Also that they follow certain consonant-vowel patterns, which really makes for really bland and boring text. You can't get too excited about reading. And some folks might say, well, Dr. Wilcox, you're nuts because I read Dick, Jane, and Sally. I saw Spot run, yes, you did. But then when you went to the library, if you were of my generation, then you saw rich text like the Laura Ingalls Wilder series, Madeline Engelbright. You saw lots of great and prolific authors. Today, what often happens in schools is that we control text across the curriculum. It isn't very exciting. So this program is a program we're trying to make a little more exciting, a little more authentic for kids. But it's also hard to find great literature for beginning reading kindergartners or first graders. So we're trying to strike that balance all the time. But it's a very good question. I would share that I really enjoy having this kind of conversation with the board. Some might look at this and say, well, this is a hard conversation for us to have. I think it's a very good conversation for the board to have because we're talking about instruction and kids and what's going on. But I would come back to Dr. Hardings and say, one of the things that I think we can say, and we'll say with a little more confidence in the not too distant future, is that while the program was really pretty good for about 60% of the kids who attended, for the other 30% of kids or 40% of kids, it really was pretty much like it wouldn't have mattered whether they came or didn't come. Because when we take a look at not the specific control group of those invited to the program, but just kids in general, that number of kids who are reading below grade level stays relatively constant for us as a school system, which, you go back to my first year here, I said was our number one challenge, literacy. We've not really been able to crack the code on that and move greater numbers of kids to being more literate. And that's the work that we have to roll out.
My son was a reluctant reader up to about third or maybe even fourth grade, and then he discovered comic books. And once he found comic books, I mean, you couldn't get him away from them, to the point now where he reads 1 or 2 books a week. He's an adult, of course, now, but maybe part of it is finding the niche that each individual student really enjoys reading about.
A lot of our librarians and some of our really great classroom instructors are introducing graphic text to kids, which are really a comic book, if you will, but perhaps with a little more advanced theme in some cases. But we're going to get there. That's why Dr. Domain is here.
I mean, personally, Calvin and Hobbes taught me how to read. Which reminds me, I was looking at this.
Brevity taught me, if that's the case.
Well, I mean, that's what happened. I encountered words that I didn't know, and I encountered jokes that I didn't understand. But also, that just reminds me, I looked this up while we were talking about this. Kelvin's dad is talking to Kelvin, a first grader, about why he's not doing well in school, why he's not doing well with reading. And, I mean, his dad says, you like to read and you like to learn. I know you do. You've read every dinosaur book ever written, and you've learned a lot. So why don't you like school? And Kelvin just says, we don't read about dinosaurs.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the key is finding something that kids will enjoy
Connect to.
reading.
Absolutely.
That is a big part of it.
Thank you both. Great discussion.
And you did get that joke about bones and guts there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Next, we have personnel action.
Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, members of the board, there is, as discussed in closed session, there is one personnel action for your review and consideration.
Is there a motion to approve personnel actions recommended by staff?
Mr. President, I move to accept personnel actions as presented earlier today.
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Fisher. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the personnel actions? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0 and the student member abstains.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have board member committee reports. Mrs. Harshman, curriculum.
We have not had a meeting since we reorganized. Our first meeting will be January 28th at 11:45 in the board conference room. The agenda will be posted.
Mrs. Williams, finance.
Yes, the Finance Committee has not had a meeting yet since the reorganization, and we're looking at the first week in February for a meeting, and so that date and time will be posted and go accordingly.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Fisher, policy review and development.
Policy Committee is scheduled to meet on the 28th at 1:45. It will be our first meeting since a minor reorganization with our committee.
Mr. Bailey, facilities.
Facilities has not met either, Mr. President, in the new reorganization, but we do have a meeting scheduled for January 28th.
Okay, Mr. Ridenhour, human resources.
HR has not met. We are working on a date that works well for all of us as a result of having to change on the 28th.
Okay. Anything from any of the MABE committees? Mrs. Harshman, Mrs. Williams, from conference planning, anything from that committee?
We have a conference planning committee meeting coming up on January 16th. That will be the first one for this year.
Okay. Mrs. Brightman, anything from legislative?
Just a couple things. Several pre-filed pieces of legislation that some early trends, a lot of items about school security. We have also some more legislation on bullying hotlines, hotline tip locations for reporting of bullying instances. Our first bill, House Bill 76, what we're saying at MABE is just say no. It's about the Common Core. It's the first one out there. We expect many, many more pieces of legislation very negative toward the Common Core standards. The MSA testing, PARC testing, and evaluation, that seems to be very fertile ground for the legislators this year. Also, the start time for public schools has already been put out there, and some more changes with the Ethics Commission. One thing I would share, and something we as a board may want to consider, several of the counties in in trying to support the contention that local discretion and local governance of education is the way to go rather than federal and state mandates. And in doing so, we're trying to tell the story about how successful we are at the local level. And so in doing that, several of the districts, Anne Arundel, the most recent county, is partnering with their Business Roundtable and the Chamber of Commerce to develop and execute an economic benefit study and why education supports the economic growth of a community. And it seems to be something that they can then take that onto their funding agencies at the local level as well as the state level and say, this is what we've done, this is what we can accomplish, and this is why it's important to support our work and our role. I would suggest that MABE has a new bill tracking system on their web page that everyone might want to go in and explore. It's fairly easy to navigate. There's several links and right into the bill, and you can get the content of the bill as well as a summary. A lot of talk again about pre-K, universal pre-K. The governor evidently is going to be proposing some form of a universal pre-K. And we're also expecting some legislation to strengthen the labor board. And I think that's about it for right now. Thank you.
And I'll just give a plug for the P20 Arts Education Council, Mr. Ridenauer, which is meeting at the Barbara Ingram School on January 15th at 5 o'clock. That's open to the public. Everybody's invited to attend. Is that correct? A way to showcase Washington County taking the lead in arts education. So please come, anybody who's interested. Next, we have miscellaneous business discussion on the proposed state student discipline regulations. We had discussed this a couple of months ago and sent a letter to the state. The regulations are back available for public comment, and we set this time aside to see whether we wanted to provide any additional comments to the state. And I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Brightman a little bit since she's sort of our liaison to the state. We've all seen copies of MABE's position that they took and sent to the state as well regarding the discipline regulations. We can adopt things from there or stand with what we have. So I'll open the floor for discussion.
Hopefully everyone's been receiving the emails I've sent with some information so that we would all sort of be prepared for this discussion. So I'm basically referencing the recommendations I put forward. We have, I think, the deadline, I think Mr. Trotta, is January 13th to respond with comments to the most recent regs that were published. I guess what I recommended in part of the discussion this evening might be that the policy committee, and I'm sitting next to the chair here, we may want to go ahead and start work on writing the policy because it does appear that a vast majority of these new regs as well as the code of conduct will be moving forward to us, and we will be required to incorporate those in our policy. A friendly suggestion was to preface our policy with a statement of our intent, and again, I'm just my words and maybe not the best words, but the idea that we believe, again, that our local communities, our principal, our superintendent, we know our communities, our school communities, and we support the administration of reasonableness and common sense approach to student discipline and code of conduct. There are some very new approaches in the recommended regs and code of conduct that put the balance between perpetrator and victim in question, something that the state of Maryland has invariably supported the victim, and it looks like that balance may be shifting to the perpetrator. So it's one of those, we need to understand or state that safety is paramount in all of our schools, and all of our children deserve to be safe. So there is some concern there will be some legal ramifications from this. There will be some case precedent coming forward. So the first comment was to maybe move ahead and do the policy, but preface it with a statement. So I'll stop at that point and see where we go there, and then I had some other recommendations.
Okay, so the policy, the state would take its final action at its board meeting on which date this month?
It's
20th or something?
It's the 28th.
28th.
Mm-hmm.
So we would know what the final action is by the time even the policy committee meets again.
He would.
So does that make sense to sort of charge the policy committee with beginning their work on this? I think it's going to be ongoing for some time.
And I think it needs to be in place by
By the start of the school year.
It does. So
According to
there's
the
not a
draft
lot
regs.
of time to put all the pieces together.
It actually has to be completed before then, because we do have to
Oh.
prepare our handbooks
Oh,
and things
that's
like
right.
that. So my sense is the work would need to be concluded by late May, early June.
That's fast.
That's,
Okay.
so it may want to go to the top of the policy agenda.
It's a long list on the
Yeah.
policy committee. All right. Is there consensus to sort of move that towards policy as quickly as we can get it moving and consistent with doing a thoughtful and comprehensive job? Okay. Next item.
The second suggestion or recommendation would be to go ahead and do another letter or response rather than a letter to the regulations, restating some of our initial concerns and maybe even supporting the MABE letter or portions of it that we do agree with. So there might be some way of aligning those two. And then again, copying those to all the long list of people we copied them to, as well as the Administrative and Legislative Review Committee, which does have the oversight authority to either slow this process down or send it back for reconsideration. But no one's sure whether it's an election year, whether they're willing to maybe tackle this or not. So there is a concern that by continuing to push back against these regs and code of conduct recommendations, that we are seen as not taking the disproportionality issue as seriously as we should. So I do think any letter or recommendation or response makes it very clear that we are aware that that is an issue in the state of Maryland. And maybe it's an opportunity for us to show what we do well and what some of our best practices are in our county. Again, local discretion, and then proving that because we're given that responsibility that we've done a good job of handling those issues. So it's a fine line, I understand.
So if we were to do a letter of some sort that talked about sort of our record on that issue,
Yeah.
disparate impact, and I think what is a story of success is that examples of things that we've done, things that show our success in that regard, and then to reemphasize some of the comments in our first letter.
I would, and I would also quote Dr. Dukes, the president of the State Board of Ed, wrote a letter recently to the superintendents, and I believe everyone saw a copy of that. And in that, they stated that the intent, they never intended for these regs and recommendations to be unreasonable or to step on local discretion or local jurisdiction. So I think that terminology would be good for us to continue to remind them of their own words And-
To ask them to hold us accountable for the result, but not the method
Not
of
the
getting
method,
there.
absolutely.
Is that consistent at all with what the superintendents are saying? or-
It is consistent with what the superintendents are saying. We want to be held accountable for results, but all of us recognize, including myself here in Washington County, that we have some issues related to disproportionality. We have issues related to disproportionality based on income. Our kids who are on free and/or reduced lunch are more likely to be disciplined for the same things as other kids. We also have some based on race, but we're looking at those things, and all of us as superintendents own up to them. We look at that data on a monthly basis.
So maybe the thing to do is to first thank and recognize the state board for starting this statewide discussion.
For starting the conversation.
And forcing all of the local LEAs
To dig
to
deeper
take a
and
hard
look.
look at how
Yes.
we're doing, to acknowledge that, to say that we think we have some success, but we also have areas where we can do better, and then ask them to please, in the final regulations, focus on
Local solution.
telling us what the standard should be, but letting us find the way to get to the solution.
Because we know our communities best.
Anybody else have ideas? I'm sort of brainstorming out loud here.
So far, I'm in
Sounds
agreement with what you've said.
I had no objections to any of the corrections that MABE has made most recently. I thought they were all very sound.
So we could sign off on that or say that we agree with those as well.
I certainly do, as I read through. Are there any other things that anybody thinks ought to be included in a letter? Is there consensus to draft a letter that is written in that way, I guess? Yeah. Mr. Ridenour, are you in trouble?
Well, no, I'm just weighing it. I mean, we have made pushing for a comprehensive look at what's going on. I mean, I think whatever we do, it should be targeted. Understand where I'm coming from, Donna? Not the entire regulations, but just a targeted approach on those that we really feel are impinging
And that's what
on-
MABE did on
Yeah,
theirs, so that might
yeah.
allow us. And the big thing is that behavioral
Yeah, that one.
service
that's the
and
one
returning a
that's-
student to their
Oh, my understanding was
their
that
home
had
school,
been-
which then leads to that victim and perpetrator issue. Does the victim get moved and the perpetrator goes back to the school? So is that fair to the victim?
Well, maybe we can take the end of the
And
last
add
part
a
of the
few
letter,
specifics,
and rather
maybe.
than just wholesale signing on to MABE, talk about the things that we're particularly concerned about, which would be
That would be
the
more
behavior that you
targeted.
suggested,
Right.
as well as the
Behavioral
right to go to a particular school, which
and
is essentially what it
to
comes
return
down
to a student's home school or particular program rather than a program. In other words, the student selects
said
which
regular-
school they go
return to
back.
their regular program,
It's
which
there
was
Right.
where
the
the
one that
problem
we-
started.
Yeah.
So
The
that
use
would
of the
be,
word "the" as opposed
The.
to "a."
exactly.
No.
Okay. Is there consensus for that? I'll work with Mr. Trotta and the legal team on, and hopefully Ms. Chekovic has good notes about all that we just said so that we remember. I'm sure she does. Okay.
Thank you,
Great.
appreciate that.
Agenda planning hasn't met, so I don't really have any future agenda items to discuss at this point. If there are any particular requests people have for agenda items, we certainly can talk about it in agenda planning. Mrs. Harshman?
Well, I would like to request that we review the budgeted item for professional development for the board members and our miscellaneous item use that might allow any board member to attend both the national and state boards of education conferences as is stated in our policy. So if we could maybe look over that and see how we might accommodate that, or discuss how we might increase those budgeted items by, perhaps we could make sure everybody's permitted to attend for professional development.
Okay, got that. We can certainly discuss that in agenda planning. Anything else?
Thank you.
The only specific thing, and I just came across some notes in preparation for today where Mrs. Fisher had mentioned wanting to know some more about the AVID program. So I didn't know if that was still on your radar and if you were still interested in.
Yeah, I'm interested in it. I've just been bogged down with policy lately.
We'll put it in the, we are being deliberate about ensuring that we have an academic focused presentation or discussion, or whether it's just presenting results, but something that's academic focused at every meeting. So we'll put that on the list as well. I'm sorry.
Did you have the future agenda proposals that are listed here?
Those are items that we'll be discussing as we do agenda planning.
Okay.
Yeah, to figure out the sequence and timing of when those will come forward. Absolutely. Also under miscellaneous business, a few extra items that I'd like to briefly discuss with the board, not for action today, but more for board members to think about. The first is, as I've thought back over the last year, and the idea that the possibility that come December we may have a new board member, I'd like to think about whether we as a board could form a ad hoc committee or a work group or something to think about how we want new board member orientation to look to a new member. I think the staff does a great job talking about the budget and a lot of operational things that we do as a system. I'm not sure that we as a board do as well as we could in helping new members understand the way we operate, how items come to the board for consideration, how personnel matters are handled, how purchasing is handled with our new policy. There's just a whole host of how the committee structure works. I think there's a whole host of things that we might think about as a board designing to help new members understand the way we work, how information flows. So I'm not asking for any suggestions or volunteers necessarily today because we wouldn't have to have this in place until, say, December. But if people have ideas about how we might go about doing that as a board, I'm certainly open to them. Our policy lets us create an ad hoc committee if that should be the will of the board to do something like that. If we want to move in that direction, of course, I'd be looking for some volunteers to do that. I ask you all to just give it some thought and maybe share with me and share with your colleagues any thoughts that you might have. I think it's something that we could do that would benefit not only the next new board member, whether there's one or none in December, there may not be any, but it would benefit, I think, future boards to sort of set up that structure that as we move forward, there's a way to sort of standardize what new members learn about service on the board. So I'd ask you all to think about that. The second item I'd ask you all to think about is the result of a discussion that Mrs. Brightman and I had following the last MABE conference. She mentioned, and I hadn't noticed it at the time, but she was right, that during the MABE business meeting, there were a number of actions on motions that didn't require a second. So she sort of dusted off her Robert's rules. I dusted off mine. She had some discussions with some of the parliamentarians who work with MABE. And what, at least as I've read it, let me see if I can find it. It looks to me like that if a committee is charged with returning a motion to the board, or if the committee has the power to do so, that the committee chair makes the motion to approve and no second is required. And that is a way that the full board recognizes the role that that particular committee plays within what its jurisdiction is. So, for example, the academic program of studies, which the curriculum committee approved before it came to the full board, a way to recognize the value that the curriculum committee played in that process is that the chair would make the motion on behalf of the committee and no second is required. It just becomes a matter under board consideration. I think it makes some sense. It's really doesn't require a change in our policy because our policy already says that we follow Robert's rules. I didn't want to just make the change and start working that way because it really involves the way we all work together. So I wanted to bring it up just as a topic for you all to think about, and maybe in 2 weeks when we meet again, if anybody has any thoughts after you've had some time to do your own research, dust off your own copy of Robert's rules, maybe we can talk about that. As I said, I think it makes a lot of sense, but I didn't want to make any changes in the way we work before sort of discussing it with all of you. Any thoughts or questions?
Just could I add to that a moment? The idea is that the standing committees, we all vote on who serves on which standing committee. And those committees have an important role that I'm not sure has been as recognized as it could have been in the past. And I think this is an opportunity to have the standing committee chairs come forward, make those recommendations, because we've already given 3 members in each committee the authority to look at information and then we give the respect to them to give their recommendations to us. So and it was interesting because the president last year at the fall conference, Roger Jansen from Baltimore County, they do reports from their standing committees and no one required a second at that point. So that's where this conversation started.
Where exactly in Robert's Rules did you find this?
I can't give you a page right now.
Look under standing committees and it'll say reporting out, I believe is where I found it.
Standing committees. Informal action.
Or reports out or from.
Actions on committee reports,
Something like that.
The last thing.
Just out of curiosity, are they reports that the full board had delivered to that committee? In other words, not, it's something that the full board said we want curriculum to take a look at, and they come back with their report.
Well, reading what I've got here, it says the committee is charged with returning a motion. So that would be the situation that I think you're talking about, when you charge them with bringing back a recommendation. Or the committee has the power to do so. The way we operate, the policy committee clearly has the authority to recommend to the board a new policy. I mean, that's the way I think we've always operated, sort of informally. Now, it doesn't say anywhere specifically, I think, in our policy that the committees have the power to recommend a motion to the full board, but that's the way we've always
I have no problem.
That's how we've acted.
I was just interested. I have no problem with it either way. You still need 4 people to pass anything. So.
Right.
I just think it moves business forward and allows discussion on everything that comes from a committee.
Well, for instance, the budget adjustment comes to us.
From finance. Right?
Finance always reviews that before it comes to the board. So finance chair could certainly make the motion. And
I'm just thinking that if the purpose of a second is just to note that there's more than one board member who wants to bring discussion to an item, then that motion would be coming out with the desire of 3 board members
Absolutely.
who want to
at least
discuss and perhaps act on
Right.
an
So
item of business.
It comes with an
so-
implied second with
Right.
it.
So it just seems to me as a way to just kind of expedite
Move
the process.
business
and-
forward.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll discuss it again briefly next meeting, and then we'll consider what to do. The third item, and I just want to discuss this briefly for those watching at home. I'm sure all of our students are at home watching their board work today while they're not in class.
Sure.
I've had a lot of questions over the last, particularly 24 hours, about what happens if we have more than 5 snow days. And there's a lot of concern, I think misinformation, that if we have more than 5 snow days, we start taking days out of spring break. Our calendar was not written in order to do that. There are some counties that say if there are more snow days than X number used, these are the days from spring break that we'll start taking away. Our calendar was not written that way. So at least it's my understanding, and I'll defer to the superintendent here to see if he can confirm it, that if we have more snow days than we have built into the calendar, those will become additional days added in June. And anybody who has plans for the week before, or the week of spring break, which is Easter, we're not going to add school days back to Easter week in order to make up for inclement weather. Is that the way we intend to operate? And am I reflecting what the calendar says correctly?
That is the way that we intend to operate. However, if somebody would show us a better way, then we would certainly bring it to the board. But our intention is to honor the calendar as it is written.
Okay. And Dr. Wilcox, you wanted to mention about...
I did. We will likely have another board meeting in this facility, but I did want to say, because the Herald Mail this week published that the Chamber of Commerce was going to be having an Eggs and Issues meeting in the new building on the 28th of this month. I didn't want our larger community, who is really very responsible for us having this great opportunity, to think that we weren't going to show this beautiful facility off to them as well. While I'm not prepared to offer a specific date, I did want to say through this forum that we will be having a number of open house events. We will ask our employees who have not had the privilege of going to this facility to come and tour it on several different occasions so that we can take advantage of not only their interest but also be respectful of their calendars and their schedules. And we will also have a kind of a larger community open house to come and see our facility at some point in this spring. So please don't think that we are only opening it to members of the Chamber of Commerce. We are going to open it to our teaching force, our support staff force, and we will also open it to the larger community a little bit later so they can see what their tax dollars have built within this community. We would even invite Ms. Fry and contingent from the executive board of our local teacher association.
Thank you. Is there any other miscellaneous business? Okay, that brings us to board member comments. Mr. Grindike?
Nothing.
We didn't mention student government during committee reports. Is there anything?
We have a meeting on the 15th.
15th.
At Tech High, 9:30.
Ms.
I
Harshman?
just hope that everyone enjoys 2014 and that if anything didn't go well in 2013, it all changes for you. So good luck to everyone.
Mrs. Williams?
I have nothing at this time, thank you.
Mrs. Brighton?
Nothing, thank you.
Mrs. Harshman? I'm sorry, Mrs. Fisher? I'm sorry.
You moved down here real quick. Nothing in general, but Mr. Trotta, don't leave. I need to talk to you.
Mr. Bailey?
I have nothing to add.
Mr. Ridenhour?
Nothing. One quick thing, I'd like to thank Dr. Wilcox and Steve Burnett for handling an issue that was very sensitive for one of our students. I appreciate you guys stepping right in and taking care of it and dealing with this.
And I want to say, too, just to the public, as we watch Dr. Wilcox and his staff work very hard to make decisions about whether to open school or close school or delay school, I just want the public to know that the team here takes that question very, very seriously. It is whether the call is made the evening before, as it was yesterday, or whether it's made early in the morning. The primary thing on their mind is what's best for our students and what's best for our families. And I just want everybody out there to know how seriously they take that responsibility, and they do the best they can to make the best call they can every time, and I hope everybody understands that. And I just want them to know, on behalf of the community, how much I appreciate the care, concern, and effort they put into making those decisions. There's no further business before the board. I declare the meeting adjourned.